Well, welcome everybody to week 5 of the Formula G series here on the YouTube. I am Zotomo, and I'm joined as always by Calamity. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah, we were in your home country of Austria this week, Calamity. How did that
hmm
make you feel?
I was expecting a bit better, but it was all right, fun to play.
Yeah, it definitely was. Very interesting country with some very diverse locations. So let's just jump right in and take a look at those. Starting off with right outside of the capital, pretty much, Calamity.
Yep, we started just on the well, technically just past the outskirts of Vienna, on a sort of almost like a parking lot just next to it, in a sort of a shopping area. A lot of bigger shops like that were around. The funny thing for that location for me was that I was playing the Austrian map with a friend of mine a month or 2 months ago, and I had this exact location. So I was thinking I should know where this is, and I kept looking in like slightly the wrong places instead of just going to the next sign and knowing exactly where it is, because there were signs, like really easy signs everywhere.
Mhm.
But with 5 minutes, like once I realized I wasn't going to find it by just looking for it after a minute or so. Just, take one step forward, look at the sign, and you know where you are pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think I had a little bit of an issue where I saw those signs and I found a place that looked like it would be right, but then none of the POIs matched up.
Mm.
And I was like, wait a minute, wait a minute. And I kept moving forward, trying to figure it out. And then when I went back the other direction, returning to the start, I saw another few things and that made it easier. But you definitely didn't need to move a whole lot
Yeah.
at all in order to be able to get 5K on this one. And I think a lot of drivers did get 5K indeed on that. So
Yeah, I think with the exception of one person, everyone got 5K there.
yeah, not a bad round indeed. Well, round 2 was down near our sprint location, south of Graz.
Yep. Actually more, yeah, sort of southeast of Graz, on a highway. And highways in general, I really don't like in Geoguessr because
Yeah.
they're most of the time they're awful to pinpoint. This one had the benefit of starting right next to sort of a side road that went off to a different area. Unfortunately for me, not quite at the place where it looks like you are. The markers, either it's the marker that's slightly off, or it's the what do you call it? The map that's slightly off. But that lost me a couple of points there, and a few other people as well. There were loads of people who lost like 2-3 points there. Let me actually see if they all. Yeah, everyone sort of went in the same place there, with the exception of like 4 people, I think, who got it at the right point. But yeah, generally relatively easy to figure out if you moved far enough in either direction. Most Austrian highway exits have enough information to you for you to figure out the general area.
Yeah, the exits were definitely helpful in this round. Yeah, I kind of just got a little bit confused. I thought we were at the other end of the little U road that connected it. And I just wasn't, that's just sloppy on my part, to be fair. Just wasn't looking carefully enough, and I picked the wrong meeting of the same road. So I was about like, I think I got like 20 points off or something like that
Yeah.
on that one. So a bit unfortunate for that. But yeah, I know what you mean. A lot of highways in Europe, and I play a lot in Japan, and Japan has the same thing. You have those soundproofing kind of walls where at times you can't even see anything besides the road, so it's really hard to pinpoint where in the road you are. This is where things like doing proportional clicking, like how far away am I from this to this thing, and then trying to guess that on a map, that can kind of work out, but that's about the best you can do.
Yeah, the problem with that is the best. That works best when you're relatively close to things that you can use as reference. So like maybe 10, 15 clicks away, or if you've got a bigger margin of error. So if you can be like 50, 100 meters off, then it works for bigger distances too. But if you can't be off more than 14 meters and it's about 500 meters either way of nothing to use, then it's really tough.
Yeah, it definitely helps on world maps and the like more than on country maps. But round 3 saw the first of a series of pretty much border locations in this seed.
That was actually, I think, probably one of the most rural locations we got. Probably the only one, actually. You could argue about location 4 as well, but that was still close to bigger cities. This was the only one that was actually in the middle of nowhere. But still, even then, close by in the city of Tarsdorf, you could find signs to a lot of the bigger cities that were around there. Some of them not even in Austria. Like, you could find signs towards Burghausen there. And that made it relatively easy to track down where you are. Still, it took me quite a while. I'm always bad at sort of seeing signs towards cities in every direction almost, and then tracking down where you are exactly. But the city of Tarsdorf does show up from a relatively high zoom level, so it wasn't too difficult to figure out. But again, a lot of people there having problems with pinpointing. I think I myself was 40 meters off there because, again, not only highways in Austria have that problem, but there's a lot of rural roads that, don't really have many features that tell you, okay, this is where you have to click. But I think that was one where I generally didn't do the best job at pinpointing.
Yeah, for me, I just kind of got distracted. I was looking for something on the wrong side of one of those yellow roads. I think it might have been the 147 or something. And I was looking east when I should have been looking west, and so I was zoomed in too far and didn't even see it. And then when time ran out, I was like, oh boy, good job. Just basically looking at the wrong part of the map and missed it. But yeah, other than that, not too bad. Round 4 did see us move all the way to the western tip of Austria.
Yeah, you could have probably, let me see. I think you could have easily made it over to the border with Switzerland. I just don't know if it's as apparent as I would think it is. Let me have a look. Yeah, you'd have to make a weird curve around the road there because there's a missing coverage. And even then, if you make it to the border, it doesn't really look like a border, to be honest. So that would have probably not been helpful. But there were signs around, plenty of signs. I think the one that told me immediately where we are was a sign towards Altach, which I know exactly where it is, and Götzis as well, another of the biggest cities in that area. And we started right in front of a sign that told us which town we're in, so that made it relatively easy as well.
Yeah, and we started off on a pretty noticeable kind of like curve in the road and everything, so it wasn't too hard to do. But for me, what was the interesting thing was just seeing the town names, but then it had CH in brackets. So you're like, okay, well, these are Swiss towns, and I've got to be really close to the border, and then you basically just follow that border until you find the city names. So that's kind of how I did it.
I don't even think I walked that far. Let me check. Let me go back to that sign where I saw the names. Did I? No, I was done with looking for it before I found that.
Okay, that's what helped me out for sure. Was we're on the border somewhere. Find those little town names, and boom, you got it.
Thankfully, the Swiss-Austrian border isn't exactly very long.
Yeah, pretty easy to search, and especially with 5 minutes to go. And then round 5, southwest of Salzburg.
More highways.
And more highways, indeed.
Yeah, I actually talked about this location in particular with Mr. Blue yesterday, and I told him even if I cheated and knew exactly where I had to put my marker, I probably still wouldn't have gotten as close as a lot of the people in this round, and I have no idea how they did it. Both Giovanni, Max, Jack, those were all like within 6 meters on a pretty much totally featureless road. I think to the west, let me actually check how long that is. I mean, there's nothing for about 1 kilometer or two to the east. And the next turn in the road to the west is about 500 meters away. And yeah, there's nothing between that turn and this location. And to the east, to the next sort of distinguishable thing, it's 2 kilometers. So yeah, if any of those people is listening, please tell me how you do that. I want to know.
I think we all do. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it did sort
not
of
easy to pinpoint at all.
Yeah, I did the best I could, and I was 100 meters off and lost like 12 points there. So yeah, pretty difficult. A lot of people losing a couple of points there.
Yeah, I mean, you knew the road, you knew the big cities around, but again, that pinpointing of where exactly on this pretty much featureless road are you was really tricky, and I think I was just off by a bit, so just really hard to do. Yeah. Yeah, well, that does it for the feature race locations. Let's move on to the sprint race. And we had a very small margin of error here, given that they were all clustered in a very small part of Graz, not even a larger area. So Calamity, you want to give us a rundown of how those locations played out for you?
Yeah, I think I've said enough about my opinion of the sprint race in particular and everything surrounding it on Reddit and everything like that, so you can read it there if you want. So I'll just neutrally tell you about the locations that were in the race.
Okay.
For me, it started off in a relatively nice location, actually, in sort of the middle of the city, in a shopping street that had a bunch of things. It had sort of a tourist information center here, and the road names were also pretty close, I think. So that made it relatively easy to find, because it just looked like right downtown. So this sort of your search area was relatively limited. The tourist information center stands out once you zoom into it. So that made it not too difficult. What I also have to mention here, time limits were very limited for some of the people. So don't be surprised if afterwards when we show you the results for the sprint race, a lot of people barely got any points, because the shortest time limit was 20 seconds. And yeah, as I think
it was fun.
I'm not exactly sure who said that. I think it was either Jack or Closed, who said even if he did live there, or even having lived there, 20 seconds wouldn't have been enough to accurately pinpoint most of the locations. So yeah, some of them barely even stood a chance. Then location 2, I think is still, it's not far away. It's still pretty close to location 1, but it's another interesting location. It's sufficiently different from location 1 to still make for a decent location in the sprint race. But again, street names everywhere. So it wasn't difficult to find, provided you did have more than 20 seconds to find it. And yeah, all street signs in Graz tell you which district you're in. So that obviously helps. In this case, obviously, you didn't really have to know a lot of districts. But yeah, made the search for these small streets a bit easier again. Then we move on to location 3, which was the only location that wasn't in the district of the inner city, although still very close to it, of course, which was in the district of Lend. The problem for me there was that that district in and of itself is relatively big. I think it might actually be one of the biggest sort of central districts. And I completely forgot that immediately if you go east, you met a river, the big river that runs through Graz. And I sort of forgot that, but until the point where I found the street name. And then I looked in the wrong places. And well, I was 1 kilometer away, so that's no points. Because another issue, the biggest issue to me with having all the locations close together, where it would be good if you had at least like one further away, is that it massively affects the points. Where if you're like 500 meters away, you're gonna get about 700-800 points. So basically, you either know where you are or you get no points. Pinpointing then comes into play, to make up slight differences, but that's not fun. We then moved on to location 4, where other problems came into play apart from the sort of location distribution, which was that location 4 was unofficial coverage. Obviously, as
weird car.
Yeah. Ben said that he just didn't have the time to check the seeds, because he obviously didn't intend to use this sort of unofficial coverage in the seed, but the Geoguessr map maker is a bit tricky sometimes. And sometimes even if you did select official coverage, it sort of switches over to unofficial coverage for whatever reason. So that happened here. And it wasn't too difficult here to get out of the unofficial coverage. You just had to move around a bit. But even then, I don't know if it was just me, but I couldn't really find any street names whatsoever.
Yeah.
Also probably just a feature of being in the city center. And probably this is the most city center of all of the locations. Well, probably not the exact word, the exact way to phrase that, but yeah, it's sort of the biggest street going through the city center. So you're less likely to find street names on sort of the bigger streets. In the end, I pretty much guessed almost randomly and got it spot on. Just based on the sort of the tram lines going through and the being on a bigger city. And then we moved on to a photosphere, which again wasn't intentional by Ben, but it happened. Not too difficult to figure out, I would say, sort of where you could be there. I mean, you were clearly in a park. Also, very likely, just looking around the photosphere, relatively high up. So there's a couple positions where that could be, but sort of the Schlossberg, which is just a castle mountain, literally translated into English, seemed like the most likely place to me, and it did end up being that. The problem with the photosphere was, as is often the case with photospheres, was that the compass was wrong, which made pinpointing even more difficult. I assume if you had more than like a minute or so, you could still pinpoint it based on the way sort of the paths on that mountain are laid out. But I'm not entirely sure if the photosphere itself is even correctly placed. And yeah, that would be tough to do, but might be possible. But yeah, you probably still rely on luck.
Yeah, for those of you who wondering why I was laughing at the beginning, as a substitute driver, we get the shortest sprint time. So I had 20 seconds to figure out where I was, which often was barely enough to move, read a road sign, and then try to throw down a marker. One of them I clicked with I thought I had 2 seconds left, but apparently Geoguessr said, no, you clicked after the buzzer. So I got 0 points for that one. But yeah, definitely time coming into this one, and given how close all the locations were, even a few meters could make up hundreds of points of difference. So it was kind of a feast or famine kind of sprint race for a lot of players, where you're seeing scores of 200-300 around to then jumping to 3,000-4,000 around at the other end. So
to give you a bit more
rough.
of sort of a marker, the cutoff for getting more than 4,000 points, for that you had to be less than 26 meters off.
Yeah, with I think, how long did you have to do it?
I've had a minute, which was
You're like in the middle of the pack, so
yeah, just about enough time to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very rough and crazy sprint race indeed. So let's see what this all means for all the crazy scores and results. First, if that feature race, taking the podium this week, Jack, Tall Impala, and Max FI. Jack, the only one getting a perfect score of 25k, being a total of 21 kilometers off, so he gets that bonus 5 points, and so that's very nice for him. Calamity, also your home country, but way down in ninth place for you, and I again filled in. And as you can see, very competitive, 22,723 points, not enough to be anywhere above last place. So you had to pretty much be over 24 to even have a shot at this one. 24.9 actually.
Yep.
To get in the top 10. So very tough.
Basically, if you lost more than 20 points, you're out of the top 10. And yeah, for me, my main problem was just the location on that highway. And I'd say I'm good at pinpointing, but I'm bad at judging distances if there's nothing to help me to pinpoint. So yeah, we had that quite a few times here. So I was always going to struggle with that. And yeah, everyone did a pretty good job. I think I would have had a way bigger chance of getting higher up if we had less time. Like if it was a 3-minute timer, I think I would have done way better. But it is how it is. That's the format of the competition. And yeah, I don't think there were many surprises here at all, in terms of at least who was at the top. Jack being from Austria and doing very well on the pinpointing there, winning, and then sort of more or less who you'd expect. Maybe Sir Lemons as a bit of a surprise to me that he did this well. But yeah, everyone else roughly where you'd expect them. It's hard to really say someone did particularly badly when they lost like 300 points. So, yeah,
exactly. Yeah, you might be like, well, why is Mr. Blue all the way down in 13th? And you look at his score. Oh, he only lost, 200 and, not even 250 points. So it's like, well, that's, his score is very good. It's just very, very competitive overall for everybody there. Sir Lemons did quite well, closed, even though he didn't get in that top podium, still in the top 5, which means it'll look really good for his overall standings as well as for Oberhausen. Simi also putting up a good score for that team there. Nordhagen also, both players getting in the top 10 for them, so it did well for them. And as we look over to the sprint race, almost all the names stay the same at the top. Jack, a double podium, a double first for him, as well as Max getting third in both the feature race and the sprint race. Simi finishing off that podium, moving up to second in the sprint race. Calamity did pretty well on that one. Good for you, 6th place.
Yeah, did all right.
Probably time had a lot to do.
Yeah, partly because of the time. Yeah, you can see there sort of the people who had the least amount of time with barely any chance, close down in 16th, you in 18th. I think Barry Fishy Bear as well probably had a very short time limit.
Yeah, I think he was in the second bracket.
Yeah.
Oh, he was, So same with M. Wickholm and Max did really well despite that. But, I'm reading it backwards, sorry. 1, 2.
I've already closed where I can look that up, so you're going to have to do that.
Yeah, so Wakelock, Shumi, Max, M. Wickholm, Steal This Nick, pretty much the lower half were in the lower half of the sprint race. They had the least amount of time, so almost directly representative of how much time you had. Barry actually did have quite a bit of time, so I'm surprised he didn't do a little bit better with that. But
yeah, that's a bit surprising, maybe considering he usually does very well in the feature races. But yeah, maybe just a bad day. Maybe he doesn't like the city
with
of
the
Graz.
locations. So, yeah. So and it also wasn't very generous, as we did mention earlier.
Yeah,
so
you can see there's Sir Lemons with 20,000 points. I'm assuming he got 4 locations like right on, and then got no points in the others. Other one.
That might be it. Might very well be it.
But yeah.
Well, let's. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to move on to our rankings, our standings. If you got nothing else.
Yep.
So. Okay. Well, then what this means for the driver standings, closed finally gets nipped out of that first place with a double taking. What do you say for first place? Podium is top 3, but what do you say for the winner? Just
victory.
Victory. Double victories for Jack. Gets him 1 point higher than closed. Max with his double third also moves himself up there to 3rd place overall. Tom Paul and Mr. Blue also staying up there close to top, and Calamity hovering around 10th where he usually is. For that. One thing to notice is that Riddick and Manislaw Geo have been missing a few rounds in a row, so they are both on the verge of maybe getting dropped for their reserve drivers. So be on the lookout for that. Yeah, but anything from you here, Calamity, on how these standings kind of shifted around a little bit?
Yeah, you can really see there the impact that having one amazing race weekend can do for you, with Jack and Max really getting up there in terms of points. And so those three alongside Closed are pulling away a bit now. You've got 36 points from Max in third to Tall Impala in fourth. And then everything's pretty close again from fourth, like down to about 10th. And yeah, we're sort of at the halfway point now. So I think pretty much everyone down to around 10th, maybe slightly lower, could still technically win the competition. But obviously the top three at this point have to be favored. Though I think going forward, let me actually look. Do you have that open somewhere? Maybe what are the sort of races to finish out the season?
Yeah, we have some really interesting kind of countries coming up. And particularly the last 2 weeks are Russia and the US.
Yeah.
Right. Now, the US is a non-blurry map, so that's somewhat advantageous for everybody. But those two countries aren't exactly always the nicest to play in. Singapore, pretty small, so points will be tough to come by just in terms of having to be more accurate than normal in a smaller map. But Italy and the UK, the next 2 weeks should be relatively standard for most drivers.
Yeah,
at least
it could be interesting because Italy and UK are both maps where you can just be in the middle of nowhere of the country and have like barely any useful signs.
Yeah, that's true. The UK, the Midlands can be pretty rough. Yeah.
Though again, with 5 minutes on the time, you're most likely to find out wherever you are anyway. If we had a shorter time limit, those could be very interesting maps because you'd be very likely to mess up on one of the rounds. Then Singapore is gonna be a complete mess. I'm predicting, because it's very easy generally to get good scores in Singapore, as we've seen in the Reddit League final, where I think Raidman got a perfect score in like 6 minutes or something. So I'm interested in what the time limits for the sprint race are going to be there, and that could also be very interesting for who's going to get the fastest perfect score, because there will definitely be a bunch of those, and yeah, that could come down to like, I could even see it going as low as 4 or 5 minutes for a perfect score. So that'll be interesting. And then, yeah, as you said, Russia and the US to finish it off. Will both be very interesting. I'm kind of looking forward to Sochi in the sprint race there, because Sochi is a pretty nice city. But yeah, a lot can still happen. And yeah, there's still a lot to go and a lot of interesting maps.
Yeah, I was playing a US cities map last week, and I was reminded by how non-dense US cities can be. I don't remember what city I was in, but like it looked like you would be in a suburb, but then the actual location was like dead, like 2 blocks off of downtown or something. And it's just like, oh yeah, America's just non-dense, sprawling, urban, and you can't really use a lot of like, oh, this looks like it's suburban or something to help you at all.
Yeah,
especially in cities like Austin.
Yeah,
Austin does have a pretty big downtown, but outside of the immediate downtown area, you've got just sprawl. So good luck with that in terms of having some good clues to use. That could be tricky for some people.
Yeah,
so.
and Austin also doesn't really have that typical American road numbering system everywhere. They do have some of it in parts, but not in its entirety. But yeah, we'll talk about that probably later on when we get closer to the end of the season.
Yeah, I definitely think the last 2 weeks are really going to keep things interesting. It could get really tight and look like somebody's going to kind of get away from everybody through week 8. But again, if depends on the seeds and timing, week 9 and 10 could definitely bring somebody back up into contention again. So not a bad design in terms of the schedule at all from the organizers here. Okay, well, let's take a look finally at that Constructor Challenge, how the teams are doing. Don't forget, every team has 2 drivers, and their points get added up to the Constructor Cup. Oberhausen still maintaining that top spot, but Nordhagen and Skarum, as well as Bamberg, all rising, given strong performances by their drivers the last few weeks, at the expense of Katsurivatsa, Lancaster, and Octane move down. The problem with some of the teams towards the bottom, Opava and Chariot, are not consistent drivers. Chariot having Manislaw Geo not really participating in the last couple of weeks, and unfortunately my fill-in hasn't been that great, so has been a bit of a slump in the points from that. But yeah, anything from you here, Calamity?
It's sort of you start seeing a gap here, unfortunately, between Lancaster in 7th and everyone further down. Gonna have to get a bunch of points in the coming weeks to sort of close that again. And maybe Wickham can get a couple too. That would be nice. But yeah, it's still very close, and still everything can happen. Oberhausen's still leading, of course, but I think their advantage hasn't gotten much bigger in the past few weeks. So yeah, everything can still happen, as I've said pretty much for the last 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I mean, Oberhausen with Simi and Closed have still been putting up good numbers, but they're always in that kind of 3rd to 7th position, somewhere in there. So they're getting good points, but they're not taking the big points, and those are going to teams like Nordhagen, Skansturum, and Bamberg, and so those teams have really been rising as a result of that. And we'll see, maybe next week they can actually put in a few challenges for that top spot here. Indeed. Well, then let's wrap things up with a look at the race maps for week 6 in the UK. We are in a United Kingdom better map by Wolf Trekker, our second map, not by Mapper. Average score of 16,864 with almost 11,000 plays and 8,000 locations. And I believe the sprint race will be in Milton Keynes, which should be an interesting city indeed. Not a major one. Probably most people aren't familiar with that. So,
yeah, the interesting part about Milton Keynes is that it's very uniform in its sort of layout. It almost looks a bit like an American city if you look at it, because it's just a bunch of squares everywhere and with the roads. I'm not sure how difficult it's going to be. It obviously depends a lot on the time limit as well. But it could definitely be an interesting map to play. I probably will have to do a bit of practice there. I also am not entirely sure about the city limits of Milton Keynes. Google doesn't really want to show them to me right now. But yeah, well, just have to see. And the UK in and of itself is also a pretty interesting map. It's definitely going to be a lot harder than Austria. You can just be in the middle of nowhere. And I can totally imagine that there will be a bunch of drivers who have that one round where they're stuck in the middle of nowhere for 5 minutes and can't figure out which area they're in. And usually in the UK, you often get signs towards other towns. But a lot of those signs are just like, well, this town is 4 kilometers that way and this town is 5 kilometers that way. No road names, no like bigger road numbers. So it can be very difficult to narrow down which area of the country you're in.
Yeah, this would be a fun map to find out the total distance traveled of a competitor, because you could definitely see somebody trying to click 6-7 kilometers in 5 minutes just to find anything.
Yeah, if you want, I can tell you afterwards how far exactly I traveled. I can look that up.
Does the path tracker plugin do that?
It doesn't track that, but as long as I know where I walked, I can sort of trace that on Google Maps and tell you how far it is afterwards.
So this could definitely be a map where if you just get lucky and choose the right way to go, like you choose somewhere in 3 minutes that direction is all the information you need, and you could go 5 minutes the other direction and see nothing. So a lot of drivers might have that trouble next week if I just didn't see anything for 5 minutes and unlucky in their directions they chose, which has happened to you before in Formula G itself. So, so it's definitely possible for that. But, Great. Well, we look forward to seeing all the drivers take place in Formula G. I believe after the UK, we're on a bye week again.
Yes, I think
So there'll be a little bit of a break after this next week for the drivers to take a little bit of a break and recoup maybe mentally a bit. Yeah. Well, anyways, thank you all for watching. If you like this, definitely hit that subscribe button. So we're going to have more coverage of the Formula G as we get into the second half, as well as casting some of the racers and their actual performances. So we'll see you all then. Take care.
Bye.